Hi everybody, I'm Professor Rad, and today we're going to talk about histograms for ungrouped data. So let's define what a histogram is first. So it's going to be our definition here. And it says, when the categories of a frequency distribution are numerical, it's common to display the data in a histogram, which is a bar graph that has no space between the bars. Now, in this case, we're specifically talking about ungrouped data. So what we mean by that is our categories are single numbers. In the future, we're going to look at grouped histograms, and that happens when instead of a single number, you have an interval like 5 to 8 or 21 to 33. So let's look at an example of creating such a graph. So this example says the speed limit on rural interstates varies from one state to the next. For example, Hawaii has the lowest speed limit on such roads at 60 miles per hour, while Texas has the highest at 85 miles per hour. The frequency distribution below gives the highest speed limit posted on rural interstates for each of the 50 states. All right, so in other words, there are 8 states that have a highest speed has a speed limit on rural interstates. So 8 states have a speed limit of 65 on the rural interstates. 7 states have a speed limit of 80, and 1 state has a speed limit of 85. That would be Texas. So we're going to create a histogram. I'm going to start out the same way that I start out for a bar graph, because this is a special type of bar graph. So I'm going to start out by figuring out what I should label this axis, how I should label this axis, and then give it a title. So my frequencies range from 1 to 22. That looks to be the highest. So I have to think about how I might want to label this. I'm going to start at 0 since 1 is pretty small. And last time we tried counting by 2s, let's see if that'll work. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I don't get to 22. So maybe I count by maybe 3s. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Nope, not there yet. So let's try 4s. So 4 is 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. That'll get us there. So let's go with 4s. So I have 4 and 4 is 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. And because those are our frequencies, that's what I'm going to label on the side. Now, I do want to point out that I tend to do kind of a clumsy way of finding my interval up here. There is a more elegant way. So what I mean by that is I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intervals. So I could take 22 and divide it by 6, and that'll give me a little bit more than 3. So I would know that I should probably go by 4s as opposed to 3s to make sure that I get all the way up to the top there. So if this isn't labeled, that's another way you could do that. So you could do 22 divided by 6, get something a little bit bigger than 3. So an easy number to count by would be 4s. Now I'm going to label this axis, and I'm going to label it based on the speed limits they've given us. So the first one is 60. Then we have 65, 70, 75, 80, 85. And then for this next one, I am going to label it by the next number it would be. So in this case, we get 90. When you're creating your histogram, you always want it to go to that extra spot. And then lastly, notice that there's some empty space here. So when we started this vertical axis, we started at 0 as the floor and then went up. And typically when you create a graph, it's assumed that that's what you're doing, that the axis represents 0 at the beginning. The problem here is our smallest number is 60, and if I started here at 0, I have to keep my intervals even, so I would be going quite a ways before I actually got to the important spot. So basically we're going to cut out that piece that would be an empty graph. So we're going to insert what's called a break in the graph. Kind of looks like a little heartbeat monitor, like that. And that helps us know that there's no data over there. We're just kind of cutting it out. Then I also want to label what these numbers represent. So in the table, it's speed limit in miles per hour. So that's how I'm going to label it. And lastly, let's give this graph a title. So I'm going to bring back the context so we can figure out a title for this graph. So these are speed limits on rural interstates in the US. So that's what I'm going to call it, speed limits on rural interstates. Maybe speed limits on US rural interstates, yeah. So how about US rural interstate speed limits? I like that better. Let's call it that. US rural interstate speed limits. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to bring out the red pen again just to make it easier for you to see the bars as I draw them. So we're going to draw the bars kind of like we did for our bar graph, but the main difference is we do not skip any spaces between the bars. So you'll notice that the way that this grid is set up, again, it won't always necessarily look like this, but the way that it's set up is so that these lines are in between these lines that I'm labeling each bar with. So for the bar for 60, it's going to go from the line to the left to the line to the right. And the bar for 65 is going to go from this bar to over here, this bar. So there's no space in between them. The bar for 60 had a frequency of 1. So if this is 4, halfway would be 2. And so 1 is going to be halfway between 0 and 2. So when I draw the bar, it's going to go halfway. It's going to go in the middle of that space. 65, the bar is going to go up to 8, which was labeled here. So I'm just going to continue that side up. Go over to the next one. 70 is the big one, goes up to 22. So if this is 20 and that's 24, halfway is 22. So here's 20, 22. The next one is 11. So this is 12. This is 8. Halfway between is 10. So 11 is going to be halfway between 10 and 12. So if this is 12, this would be 11. Then we have 7, which is going to be just below 8. And for 85, we have 1. All right. Now, the reason we had to put this extra number 90 over here on the edge was so that we had space for this bar to exist. If I didn't have this extra space, then there wouldn't be enough room for that bar. Now, as with bar graphs, if I want to, I can shade in the bars to make it a little bit easier for me to see them. That would be okay. And I could also add the data counts above each bar. So I could call this one 1, 8, 22, 11, 7, and 1. Again, those two aspects are optional. However, making sure to label and making sure you have this break, and making sure you do not skip spaces between the bars for your histogram. Those are the requirements that we're going to be looking at, in addition to making sure the bars are the correct heights. All right, so we're going to move away in the next video from visualizing the data, and we're going to move into some more formula kinds of stuff in summarizing that number in a way. So for example, if somebody asked me, hey, what's the speed limit on a rural interstate in the US? Based on this data, I might tell them it's about 70 miles per hour, because that seems where most of them live, or at least that's the biggest bar, and most of them are pretty close to 70. So that would be a good way to just kind of give one number as a summary value. So that's what we're going to talk about in the videos to come. I hope you found this video helpful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now, everybody.